The Indianapolis Colts have tabbed Anthony Richardson as their quarterback of the future. They've taken him 4th overall. We're going to talk about his fantasy value for redraft, for dynasty, other players on the Colts right now on Fantasy Football Today. Here on YouTube, I'm Dave Richard. I'm with Heath Cummings. Heath, reaction for redraft for Anthony Richardson going to Indianapolis?
The most exciting pick of the draft so far. I think Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, much more likely to have 10-year careers and be good quarterbacks in the NFL. But Anthony Richardson, if he wins the job before week 1 of his rookie year, is instantly a top 12 quarterback for redraft purposes. He's already a top 8 quarterback for me for dynasty purposes. We are talking about arguably, and maybe not even arguably, the greatest athlete to ever go to the combine as a quarterback. Now working with the offensive coordinator who just orchestrated Jalen Hurts' incredible season. And not just incredible season, but it's not, we need to rewind the tape just a little bit on the takes on Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, there were people who did not think he would ever be a starter in the NFL. There were people who thought, well, they're going to draft a quarterback this year. They've got all these picks. They'll draft a quarterback this year. And this guy took that guy and took him to the Super Bowl. And so I think you should project, if Richardson wins the job, Jalen Hurts' role onto Anthony Richardson. Not his efficiency, not his success, but his role. And that role is a top 12 quarterback.
I said that his floor, I did a player comp for Anthony Richardson's floor and his ceiling. And I said the floor was Jalen Hurts in his first year as a starter, which was pretty good. That was a top 12 fantasy quarterback on a per game basis. But his ceiling is what we got from Jalen Hurts this past year, the year where he led Philadelphia to the Super Bowl. And that was a top 5 type of fantasy quarterback, an absolute stud. And I think he can read defenses. I don't know if he's necessarily processing the same way that Bryce Young or CJ Stroud might, but we saw him read defenses. We saw him make plays at Florida. And so I don't think that learning curve, especially in an offense that's led by Shane Steichen, who has this experience with Hurts, I don't think it's that bad. And it wouldn't surprise me. I think he'd have to absolutely struggle in training camp in the preseason for him not to be the starter week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts, because honestly, what do they have to lose? Starting Gardner Minshew, cover your ears, Heath. You're not going to like hearing this. What's the point? Just get right to Anthony
You can be
Richardson.
competitive with Gardner Minshew. I will disagree with you on this point, and that's the floor of Anthony Richardson, because I do not believe it's the floor of Anthony Richardson is that he does not improve the things that glaringly he must improve to play quarterback in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying that his deficiencies are so great that he could not improve those things before week 1 and be a worthwhile starter. But I do think that Anthony Richardson, at the level of player that we saw in his final football that we saw, is not good enough to play quarterback in the NFL. And so he does have work to do. And I think his floor is what we've gotten out of Trey Lance so far.
Okay, so 3 rapid fire questions, and then we'll get to dynasty for Anthony Richardson, and I think we'll agree on the dynasty value. Russell Wilson or Anthony Richardson, who are you taking first in redraft?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if Anthony Richardson's a starter, then that's not the same. That's not the right discussion. The right discussion is
I'm just moving up the ladder. I'm just looking for an answer.
But tomorrow, I think in a 1 quarterback league, I would take Richardson, and 2, I would take Wilson.
Okay, that's interesting. We'll get into that during the week on FFT. What if it's Kirk Cousins or Anthony Richardson? Are you still taking Richardson ahead of Cousins?
Definitely Richardson over Cousins in 1, definitely Cousins in 2.
What about Deshaun Watson?
Oh, I think right now you have to take Watson, just because he may have the same upside as Richardson or more. Yeah. They both have a terrible floor, but I think right now you have to take Watson.
I was trying to figure out where your breaking point was. Okay. For me, Anthony Richardson is the number 1 quarterback in Dynasty, and in a Superflex or 2QB, he's my 101. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different take?
He is currently my number 1 quarterback. I will have Bijan most likely, unless we don't call his name tonight. I will have Bijan as the number 1 in all rookie drafts, period. But yes, he's QB1. The one thing that could change it is if Indianapolis sets expectations in the next month that we expect him to sit for 1 year. Because that would tell me that where their mindset is on him is a little bit different. So if they set the expectations that he's not going to play this year, then he's probably not QB1. But if he gets a chance to compete, he is.
What does this mean for Jonathan Taylor's fantasy value?
It's not great, Bob. According to the meme. I don't like we saw what this offense was for Miles Sanders. I think Jonathan Taylor can average 5 yards per carry. I think he can score 10 to 15 touchdowns. I expect his production in the receiving game, which hasn't been spectacular, but has been good enough the last couple of years, will fall off. And I think his rushing touchdown rate you should expect to drop as well.
Could he still get to 1,500 total yards and 10 touchdowns?
I have already updated my projections. Now it's the first run with Anthony Richardson. They will change a lot in the next 5 months. But yes, I still have him with 1,711 right now.
That's a guy I'm taking in round 1. No question about it. Is there anybody that you're going to target amongst the receiving core now that Anthony Richardson's the quarterback in Indy?
I mean, Pittman's still the best, but it is definitely I was projecting Gardner Minshew or league average quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, and I would rather have either of those things than Anthony Richardson if I'm Michael Pittman. So I think it's a downgrade for Michael Pittman. He is a low end number 3 wide receiver.
I agree. Probably somebody that we're looking at taking in round 7, and it might be more like round 8 in half or non-PPR. Anything else you want to add on this?
Yeah, the most exciting pick in the draft. Let's go.
I love it. I think there's all kinds of great potential for Anthony Richardson, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the rookie of the year if he plays for Indianapolis for about 13 or 14 games. A lot of potential for him. We're keeping you up to speed on every player that matters in fantasy. Stay tuned to Fantasy Football Today here on YouTube.